Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Jody Lynn, I got to tell you, I've been looking forward to this one. I mean, well, I say that a lot. I know I do say that a lot, but this one I'm really looking forward to. Have been for a while, because when I found out what their main thing is that they like to talk about, all I could think is that's what we've been talking about. Because one of the things we talked about a lot is not just the importance of human connection, but we've also been talking about what's going on in the world of digital world and how the digital connection to our guests, I'll tell you guys a phrase that I keep using over and over again is that there's nothing social about social media. It's like they've taken socializing out of social media. Well, they never actually had socializing in there in the first place, but it's even more so now. So I'm kind of bemused about why they call it social media. But I'm thinking we need to get more socializing into social media. And I'm kind of surprised that the Facebooks and Metas and Twitters and TikToks of the world haven't figured that one out yet. But I'm trying to work on that. I'm actually working on a project in that direction. So that'll be something we'll talk about. But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this topic, and I'm especially interested to find out what our guests have to say about it. So Jody Lynn, let's welcome Sam and Elliot Archuleta. I think I got the name right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, truly.
We're glad to have you. They are the hosts of the Something More Human podcast. I like that name. And they have a series of events coming up called Return to Real Life. I mean, everything here just reeks of connection. Big way. I can hardly wait to get started. So guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tell us how you got onto this journey in the first place. I mean, first of all, congratulations for hitting the whole idea that human connection was important. I'm glad you did that. But how did you get there?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And we're really also excited to be here. We have kind of a winding journey, I think, to podcasting and also kind of to this initiative that we're pioneering. We are married. And when we first got married, we really wanted to find a way to collaborate, but we're very, very different. I'm kind of that like A-brain, COO integrator type, and Elliot's that creative, visionary kind of CEO type. And while those are very, very complementary, there's also a lot of friction that comes along with that. So at first we thought maybe we would be artists together. I have a background in dance. Elliot has a background in film and photography. We applied for an international residency to maybe try and make that work. That was really late 2019. So now here comes 2020, here comes COVID, here comes closure of borders. It was obviously canceled. So we weren't able to do that residency. We thought maybe we would try podcasting. We bought podcast equipment in 2021 and we just sat on it for a while. We didn't quite know what we could find that was something we're both equally passionate enough about that we could make an entire podcast and an entire movement out of. I can let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, and so we're from Albuquerque, so we'd been there our whole lives. I'm 32, Sam is 26, and we actually moved to Denver. We're here in Denver now a year ago, and I think it really took us moving away from our community. We have a very strong community in Albuquerque, but it took moving to sort of realize that, to sort of step outside the bubble and look back and see, wow, like we actually have an incredible community back in Albuquerque. And it was something that we wanted to recreate here in Denver. And the podcast sort of just popped up again, and we started workshopping names and ideas. And one thing we knew that we were both passionate about is human connection. We think that human connection and relationships are everything in life, and without it, it's sort of meaningless to us in a lot of ways. So Something More Human was born in November, and we've seen some really cool things happening just here in the last few months. We were featured on Apple Podcasts a couple times in a row, and then, like you said, the Return to Real Life series. I know that we'll talk more about that, but we launched our first in-person event called Return to Real Life in Albuquerque, and it's a phone-free event. It was a phone-free event. It happened in April, and we sold it out, and
cool.
It was amazing. So clearly, the four of us we're all obviously on the same wavelength, and we could tell from that event that people care about that. People want an excuse to get off their phones and to connect the way that we're supposed to, and they just need that excuse. And so we said, let's provide that excuse. And so that's kind of, partly part of our mission with the podcast is finding, ways to connect more efficiently and more often in unique and authentic ways. So yeah.
I love that on a number of levels. I think you do too, Jody Lynn. I'll tell you, one of the levels I really love that on, it absolutely breaks stereotype. Because the stereotype is, the millennials and the Gen Zs, they're on their phones all the time. You can't get them away from their phones. They're not getting anything else. And here we have you guys coming along saying, not so much. I love that.
Yeah, totally. That's funny that you say that, because I feel like I'm technically, I think Gen Z, I'm right at that cusp of starting.
Yeah.
And Elliot had a phone-free birthday just to kind of play with the idea to really bring friends together. And because people loved it so much, it really kind of planted that seed for us around how can we connect with our friends on these deeper levels, because we've noticed that we're really using our phones as a crutch. When you start to feel that social awkwardness, you just pull out your phone. And what would happen in its place if we didn't do that?
Yeah.
Beautiful question.
Is that something cool happens?
Yeah. Something more human happens.
What a concept.
Right.
Something more human. So Jody Lynn, I mean, we've talked about this connection thing for quite some time now, right? When you heard what the topic was going to be today, because you get the email too, what was your first thought? What'd you think?
I was thinking like an online thing, like how you connect online better, really. That's kind of the first thing that flashed in my mind. I usually, before our shows, don't do very much research. I rarely look at the websites because I like to be surprised. I just go into the conversation and whatever happens. But I did read on your guys' pages, and I loved how you included what you like and what you don't like. I thought that was the cutest thing ever. So
yeah, just a little quirky bit in there.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think it comes right back to the being human. We lose this opportunity to learn the little things about people because we're far away, or we're online, or we are too awkward to even ask or tell people about ourselves. So I learned something about each of you that I never would have learned without that. So I think that's so cool.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
That is good. And that's a key piece of that human connection piece, right? I mean, you can't really connect directly in the way we're talking about by looking at a web page, but you can get a taste for it. And that's what you guys did. You gave a taste for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of, we were like, if it's all about human connection, there's only so much that you can do on a podcast, right? Like when we interview people, we make sure that we can interview them in person. That's just sort of the thing that we're going to stick to until we can't. But that's the thing that we really want to do, is every single interview that we've had with people has been here in person. And so, we're like, but there's only so much, like I said, there's only so much connection there. So what else can we do? And so that's why the event series was born, to create these physical spaces for people to, to meet and to gather and to get together without distraction. So,
which is fantastic. And I love the fact that you had your first event and it sold out and everybody loved it. But go into detail about that. Tell us, give us the details about how they reacted.
Yeah, honestly, it's funny because I think we respond to the event slightly differently. I'm honestly still processing how well it went. Usually when there are events of that size, 100 people came, which is amazing. Yeah. Usually something mid to major goes wrong, like a wedding. Something is bound to happen, and like you have to go with the flow. Yeah, and that's kind of life. So we really set our expectations that there would be something day of that we didn't foresee that would go wrong. And it really went smoothly, which is hard to believe. So it was really powerful to have 100 people come together in a shared space with a common agreement that we're just going to be present. We're not going to have our phones. If I want to connect with you later, I'll have to find you or I'll have to write it down. And that felt really, really special. It didn't feel like there were, a couple of Facebook comments, of course, like what happens if I'm on my phone? Are you going to yell at me? Are you going to lock it up? Like that wasn't the point. It wasn't supposed to be a negative thing, but to answer kind of seek answer to the question, what would happen in the place of our phones if we didn't have them or decided to put them away? And so we've been kind of playing with this idea of positive social pressure. And what does that mean? And what does it look like? And how can we leverage it in different types of settings?
Right. It's funny you're asking to be specific about the event, and Sam's sort of been wanting to withhold a little bit because we're planning one right now actually in Denver, and we do have plans to do more around the country. And so Sam's trying to sort of keep this element of surprise. So she doesn't want to reveal everything.
Want to give it all away
at the event. Yeah, but
you have to come.
But true, and they'll be different in some ways, right? This one in Denver will be slightly different than the one in Albuquerque, but it was a programmatic event, right? It wasn't just show up, hang out, have a good time. We wanted it to be more than that. But like I said, we could really tell that obviously things clicked with people. The phone free, just that wordage is clearly resonated with people, because we did have some really cool media opportunities in Albuquerque. We were on the radio, we were on a couple of the news stations and had a 60-second segment on the news. And then one of the Facebook posts blew up, and there were so many people that were positive and negative responses, and that just told us people care about that kind of stuff. It really resonates with people. But yeah, the event was just it was programmatic. So we had we cultivated a lot of really cool vendors, some of our best friends. So there was mocktails and pastries and craft coffee, and there were comedians, and there was a Vision Quest sort of journaling meditative session. And like Sam said, it was fascinating. I mean, when was the last time you've seen 100 people in a room without a phone for 3 hours? I mean, it was very refreshing to not see a phone for 3 hours. It's so weird when you think about like that doesn't happen very often. It's like, it's so strange to think like that literally, we're like cyborgs in a way. Like our phones are really attached to us in a way, and have been for decades, which is crazy to think about. In my experience, at least, I've had a phone since I was 16. I'm 32, so I've had a phone half my life, and it's always on me. And so to not have that was pretty special. And we're really looking forward to doing that in more cities across the country. And it's a risk for sure, but we think we're passionate about it. So we're just gonna keep going with it and see what comes of it. So.
Honestly, it doesn't sound like a big risk.
No.
To me, it doesn't feel like a major risk. I was more surprised than Elliot was that this sort of Facebook post from the local news outlet garnered so many negative responses.
What were people negative about? I'm curious.
It's hard to kind of pinpoint. Some of them are really unrelated, like women's behavior, and like you're going to catfish someone if you have to go to an event without being on your phone.
Weird stuff, yeah.
Some things that are just a little bit like, it's difficult to see what the point of that message is.
Yeah.
But for me, if I see an event that doesn't resonate, I just won't go. And it doesn't sort of like incite this visceral negativity. And so it was very interesting to see that this is sort of a polarizing topic.
Right. Well, I think most of the comments that were related were basically like, first of all, like, we are not saying that phones are bad. Phones are a tool, right? But like, so let's get that out of the way. But basically what people were saying was like, but I'm reading this on my phone. It's going to be an event that you have to get online to purchase tickets. And we're like, well, of course. Yes. Like we're working within the confines of society, right? Like technology, we're not saying technology is bad. Technology is great in so many ways. Right. So there were a lot of comments like that. And I think that to us, that was, we weren't offended by anything, but we were just like, clearly people care in a way, right? That's someone's caring. They're going out of their way to respond to this, which means that they have a visceral reaction to the phone, the phone subject. And we thought that was pretty fascinating. And we just realized that people care. Like it obviously is a topic of interest, good or bad. And that's a good thing. And it's something that we want to talk more about, without vilifying phones. Cause like I said, it's just a tool. It just depends on how you use it. But a lot of us are just using it a little bit too much, I think. Well,
I think it's become this addiction. And I think that's where the visceral reaction comes from. Because if you think about it of any other tool that you might use, like a hammer, I have never been like, where's my hammer?
Right.
And it's like, watching TV or whatever, when I didn't need my phone or whatever, I've consciously made an effort over the last few years to put it down and put it away and whatever. But I noticed that I have that reaction, like, where's my phone? Mm-hmm. But I've never done that with any other tool. Maybe my car keys.
Yeah.
But like that was out of like, did I leave my car keys in my car? And
Some
someone
people might do
like,
that with coffee cups, but I get your point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Stand
Jody Lynn,
myself.
you make a really good point. I think I also think about comfort zones, and as we come post-pandemic, it sort of feels to me like our social skills have atrophied. And so there is this desire to get out into the world, to connect. If you move to a new city, you want to make new friends, but it sort of has felt like the barrier to entry is now too big, and we're using our phones as that kind of safety blanket. And so when we think about venturing into that unknown area of the edge of our comfort zone, it can sort of cause those emotions. So that's a really, really good point that you bring up.
Yeah. I don't want to get too heavy, but I think that, I mean, part of the reason why even the birthday party phone free thing came up, and we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast. I definitely, it's funny. And then there's the dichotomy here, right? It's like, oh, you're a podcast talking all about phone free usage. Well, what about your phone usage? Mine, I've struggled with my phone for a really long time. Sam's a little bit better about hers. She's more routine oriented, but my phone usage right now is not very good. And I think that because it's not like an illicit drug, or it's not something that you inject, it's okay, right? It's seen as like this not harmful or violent thing, when it's almost just the opposite, in my opinion, because it's clearly something that you can be addicted to. Those studies are numerous. And I just think that, because it's a phone and we're just ingesting visual and audio information, that it's not a big deal. But it's quite a big deal. And one thing that we have been very interested in, I keep mispronouncing his name, Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he's an author who just came out with a book called The Anxious Generation, which is basically all about how the rise of teenage anxiety, depression, suicide, kind of really shot up between the years of 2010 and 2012. And it just so happens that's when the first smartphones were introduced to the public. And so, it is a big deal, it really is. And we don't think it is just because it seems like a harmless thing, but it definitely has its consequences. So that's something that I think we want to explore a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that's important to state here too is that we're all human, and we're all in this weird place together where we're all struggling with the same addiction, essentially, if we're going to call it that. And it's not all bad and it's not all good. It's finding that healthy balance. I think that's the point of what you guys are talking about, is learning to be more interactive and in this present moment with the individuals you're in, whether it's in this conversation right now today or, in a room, which feels a little more uncomfortable these days.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that something we often forget, especially, I know Walt, you were starting to get at this earlier, like in the age of social media, we always see the highlight reel, and it's so easy to forget that is a highlight reel. And so it's easy to start comparing ourselves to a picture perfect social media lens. And we all are just human. We're all really quirky. We all feel awkward sometimes. We all make mistakes. We all fail each other. But to kind of own up to that and to practice that vulnerability when those moments happen, we're always better for it. But it's something that has sort of fallen on the back burner, I think, as we've gotten deeper and deeper into social media and this kind of comparison game.
Yeah. And Sam, in fact, you a few minutes ago, you made reference to the word safe. In other words, there's a safety zone sort of around that phone usage. And whenever I hear that word safe, what immediately clicks in my head, Jody Lynn's going to recognize this right away. What immediately clicks in my head is that means somebody's afraid of something.
Yeah.
Because safety is all about, I'm afraid, I need to protect myself. And that's a really interesting point, because like you guys were saying, there's I think you described it, Sam, as sort of a social atrophy that has gone on. I would describe it as, if we have phones, we don't really have to go interact with each other. It's much safer to interact by phone, because then people can't see when I'm hurting. They can't see when I'm being awkward. They can't see all these things that I don't want to show to society. And so that's where the fear factor, I think, comes in. And I suspect, this is just a guess, but I think it's a fairly accurate guess. I suspect that the comments you were getting, the Facebook comments, the negative ones in particular, were fear-based. Because essentially what you're doing is you're pulling their covers off, and nobody likes that. That's not fun. There's nothing fun about that.
I think that you hit the nail on the head. absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, it makes me think about, this is sort of a shortcut to safety, right? Because through that discomfort, there's another kind of safety when we find people that we really have a deep connection with, and there are those spaces where we can be vulnerable. But in order to get there, you have to go through the discomfort of meeting someone new or putting yourself out there or risk being rejected. And so instead of taking that path, we've sort of fell into the easy way of just using our phones.
Yeah.
But
And
how
it
much
is.
are we missing in life and in
Man.
connection by doing so? Like, we tend to have these surface connections where we never really go deep enough with the people that we're surrounded with, or ourselves for that matter, because we're distracted.
Yeah, Jody, that's pretty crazy you mentioned that, because we sort of changed our language a little bit around the podcast, around all of our, our outlets, social media, and our website. And we're ditching the surface level stuff, because that's just, we're interested in the deeper parts of human connection. Right. And we're just finding out that the surface level stuff it's everywhere. And I think that it's the fear-based thing. And I think that the phone is like that crutch that sort of disallows us from going underneath. And that's kind of what we're all about. And, we're willing to have the really uncomfortable conversations that may not be popular, but we think that they're like essential and vital for what we think everyone actually really, really wants, which is like community, wants love, wants to be loved, wants to have people around them that they can, champion and be championed by. And so, I think that we really believe that everyone really feels that way deep down inside. You know what I mean? So
yeah, we're ultimately pack animals, right? So this sense of seeing and being seen by your community, to me, really feels like the meaning of life, right? Like, we're really not meant to be in solitude. And so false solitude or false connection is still not quite getting it right. And it is really kind of a tough gray area, because it's easy to take one path. It's a little bit more difficult to take the other. And I think that we're just noticing the deeper we go down this rabbit hole of connection. You also said, like, what are we missing from ourselves? There's a huge element of this kind of personal development, discovery of self, leading with authenticity. How do you cultivate a community if you're not doing those things first? And so it's been a really, really kind of fun and eye-opening journey so far.
Big time. And we talked about that. This is pretty crazy, the serendipity and the kind of all being on the same wavelength. Because I talked to Sam about this a few days ago. I said, how much time do we spend on our phones, like right here on the couch, sort of like we're hanging out with each other, but we're not with each other. And we do that pretty often, like we grind all day on the podcast, and then we sort of veg out on our phones. And it's like, again, not saying it's bad, but what could we do with all of that time? Like, how much better, how much closer could Sam and I be if we spent more time, together in communion and not on our phones? The answer is pretty obvious. I think it's, unlimited. Like we could be doing much better. And so we have a lot to work on too. We're not saying that we're perfect, that we have all the answers figured out, we could be better about our phone usage too. And we want to be those examples. So, and that also means, detailing our shortcomings when, because we think people need to be able to hear that stuff. So.
I think it also works the other way around too. I'm a baby boomer, kind of on the edge between baby boom and Gen X. But as a boomer, I am, of course, subject to what all of my fellow boomers talk about, which is, these terrible millennials who have no idea, and the Gen Zs have no idea what's going on. They have no idea what real connection is. They have no idea what real society is. All this other kind of stuff. And I just know from my own experience. You were talking about how. You still feel, Elliot, that you have a little bit of a phone problem. Mine's kind of in reverse. Now, I've never been tech phobic. I was one of the few in my generation who was able to handle technology. It's one of the reasons why my career went the way it did. But to this day, I pick this phone up a few times a day, mainly because I have to. And every time I pick it up, my reaction is, oh God, I have to do this again. Exactly the diametric opposite from what you experience.
Yeah.
Now, I would suggest that neither one of those responses are truly healthy responses. But I think that the divider there, the large gap between the generations on this is what the true source is of the conflict that goes on where social media is concerned. I think social media is actually kind of an excuse. let's blame based on social media rather than deal with the fact that we have different experiences when it comes to phones.
Sure.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
That almost reminds me of like money mindset conversations, right? Like if we see money as neutral or if we see phones as neutral, that kind of means we have to turn and face ourselves in the mirror, because the thing that we're afraid of or the story that we're creating comes from up here in our minds. And so it's a lot of internal work to shift the narrative. So that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, it is. I like that a lot. Yeah.
I think that this is where I love the idea of the merger of the concepts, because I love what you guys are doing in terms of taking it offline. I really love that a lot. I also love the potential of online connection, because this is what we're doing here. I mean, we aren't in the same room, and there are certain disadvantages to not being in the same room.
Right.
But because we're doing this with audio and video, we can see each other, we can watch each other's reactions, we can pick up some body language that way. And we can develop a pretty good connection. It's not as good as being in a room, but it's pretty darn good.
Absolutely.
I just keep thinking to myself, what would happen if that large segment of the larger population that is so-called addicted to their phones, what if they were exposed to a way to connect to people in this manner on a regular basis? What happens to that overall experience of feeling that social atrophy that you were referring to a moment ago, Sam? Because I think that social atrophy actually starts to go away because the people are then being eased into more connection rather than, take your phone away. Okay, we're going to throw you out there into the pit.
Yeah.
It's a less
You could talk about maybe the community that we're.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So, of course, we're not saying phones are bad. We have a podcast. People listen to the podcast on their phones, right? Like there are QR codes on our marketing materials.
We're posting on Instagram 5 days a week. Like we're on there,
Yeah. There's a question between the two of us around, okay, we just had this event with 100 people in the room. Yes, I send emails that are like, please don't be a stranger. Let us know how you're doing. I don't know if I, as a consumer, necessarily would send an email to someone that I don't know very well, expecting them to care or to give them an update on my life. So we're asking ourselves currently, what are the ways that we can sort of stay in community with these people, city after city, month after month, year over year? And what does that look like? And it really, I think, the question that we're seeking to answer is around intentionality. How do we curate that space? How do we set those boundaries? And it's even in our personal lives. We're sort of in a new city where we don't know very many people. A lot of our friends don't live in the same state. So we've shifted from texting each other to sending a lot of voice memos because it feels like we're closer. You can really hear the tone of someone's voice. Yeah, so it's a question that we're seeking to answer around kind of digital communities, because I think that there's a great use for them, and we want to be able to engage in this kind of back and forth, right? We don't want podcasts sometimes are only one direction aside from our guests. So how can we also give and receive from our community?
I love that you're doing the voice messages too. That's very cool.
Yeah, or have you heard of Marco Polo?
No.
I'm obsessed with Marco Polo. It's kind of like if FaceTime and texting had a love child. So it's a video message, but you send it asynchronously. So you can open it and respond to it anytime you want. None of it's live. Oh. And that feels like a really kind of fun way to stay connected, because you can see the other person, you can hear what they have to say, but you don't necessarily need to be on a live call with them. So Marco Polo, like sending voice memos, those are all kind of really hot in the ways that we're connecting digitally with the people that we love.
Yeah, all of Sam's best friends, even before we left Albuquerque, sort of moved away, graduated, got jobs in DC and San Diego and everywhere, and Germany. And so she's using Marco Polo to keep up with all of them. And it's actually like really, really cool to see. I don't know how well that app's doing, but it just seems like such a really, really neat idea. I hope that it takes off, or it continues to do really well. There was something else I was going to say, but that is a great. Oh yeah, the voice memo thing. It's interesting. I feel like this sort of started, like I remember sort of around our first podcast recording with Kay and Mel. That was back in July
of 2023.
I noticed that like more of our friends started voice memoing each other, and now like some of our friends are talking about how they don't like texting at all and how it takes too much time because you're having to look at your phone, obviously, right, when you're reading or typing. But I feel like most of my friends now most of our friends are not texting anymore. Like we're all voice memoing each other, which I think is a really cool thing. And I hope that I don't know if that's, I wonder if that's just, is that just our group, or is this sort of like a phenomenon that's happening more and more, that less people are texting and more people are voice memoing? I hope that's the case, because obviously there's something more human about voice memos than texting. So that's been nice though.
I'm going to prophesy that what you're actually experiencing there is the initial surge, because what social media in my mind has done is it has taken an entire generation and a half really so completely away from socializing that there's a built-in human need that isn't being met. And so anything that starts to meet that is going to draw people back in.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like on the vanguard of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't even matter whether other people are doing it yet. It's going to happen. It's just that you're kind of leading edge.
Yeah, that's what I've been telling Sam, actually, like the term, like the pendulum swings, right? Like the pendulum is swinging so far. Like look at the new announcement that chat made. Pretty, I mean, AI is advancing obviously just at a
That's exciting. It's fun.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. But to me, the pendulum swings, the, analog, I feel like is going to start becoming more popular. And that's exciting, and I think that is, you're right. I think that is happening. Which is great. Balance is good. So,
yeah, it reminds me of what happened when the music industry went from vinyl to digital, and all of a sudden there was a surge in vinyl record purchase. Like people liked the sound, they like the imperfect sound of the vinyl recording.
Yeah, and vinyl's taken off. I mean, there are new plants being made all the time because the demand is so high right now, which is great. It's amazing. So. I'm into that.
Yeah. And I think it's really, you said it, balance. Like, how do we strike a balance between these various things that are really exciting in life and, indulge in AI, use it to develop marketing materials and copy and spark new ideas, and lean into this more analog methods of connection, like pen paling with your friends or sitting at a park and putting a puzzle together. We recently got a game that we started playing on Saturdays at a coffee shop instead of being on our phones or kind of giving ourselves unstructured time. And so balance and sort of boundaries are really kind of themes that come up for me as we think about the intentionality of these different modalities for connection.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the people who attended, I'm thinking of the 100 who came to your local workshop there. When you think of their reactions and what they were saying afterward, what was the dominant theme of those reactions?
I think a huge takeaway from me was we actually over-programmed the event. We really were nervous about people feeling like they were twiddling their thumbs or that they might not have something to do. So we incorporated a comedy show into the whole evening alongside our other vendors and workshop. So a common piece of feedback was we actually would have loved more time to chat with the people at our table or have more layers of ways to connect. And so that's something we're taking into our planning for the next event, is considering the layers more. And again, giving people an excuse. Sometimes when you're feeling awkward, it just breaks the ice to say, oh, well, the host said we should talk about this, so I'm going to ask you about it. And then it just kind of sparks that natural conversation.
Yeah, I think that we need to trust our audience. Not that we didn't trust our audience more, we just didn't know as proof of concept. But I think we're human beings. Like at the end of the day, may some of us have social anxiety? Yes. But at the end of the day, if there's 100 people that are coming for a common reason, more than likely they're going to be able to stick up for themselves, so to speak, as adults and have a conversation with someone they don't know. But like Sam's saying about breaking the ice, we went to a networking event recently, and she basically she wanted everyone to introduce themselves and basically, tell everyone what each person does. And so of course you get a little bit nervous, with that. But then she also said at the end, she's like, and at the end, tell us a food that you could not live without. And I feel like that right there broke the ice right away. And there was just this fun element. And I realized it can be something literally that simple that we introduce during the event for people to sort of get that pressure off. And then they have something specifically to talk about. And once you talk about, something that you're interested in, like food, everyone has an interest in food, the conversation really opens up. And that's exactly what happened. And so I think that we'll definitely take that into consideration for the next event and give people more time to do what we set out to do, which is, to meet new people and to connect with other human beings.
Yeah,
so.
It reminds me, Jodie, what you were saying about our website, just kind of learning quirks.
Mhm.
I think that being able to share those pieces of yourself, like things that you really like that are unrelated to your business, or things that you like, what's your latest hyperfixation? Like, I'm reading romance novels. Like, what are the things that are sort of other opportunities to learn about the human and the imperfect? And that feels really, really good, especially as we think about kind of breaking the mold of this comparison game and centering ourselves around, like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to be a flavor of weird. Like, you're going to find someone else that's your same flavor of weird. And by letting that shine through, it makes it easier to find those people. Those are really kind of concepts that we heard that we were really excited about for feedback.
And I think too that it goes right back to your podcast title of something more human. I've been to a lot of networking events, and when you were talking about no phones and you'd have to write somebody's phone number down, I immediately thought of business cards. Now I know they could have had business cards in their pocket or like whatever, but I immediately thought of networking events and how I would always walk away with a stack of business cards. And I had no freaking clue who these people were. Like, I have no idea who Sally Joe Hansen is and, whatever, right? But like, I will never forget, Sam, that you don't like cats because you're allergic. And that just because I read it off of your website, but I feel like I know more about you, and you feel more like a human being to me. When you go to a lot of networking events, not saying that your guys' event is a networking event, but like, you become a robot. Like, give me your elevator pitch, and it's like so polished and good and lovely, and you're like, I am a robot for 30 seconds. And you say as many things as you can that you've rehearsed and whatever. And then saying that, what your favorite food is or what you can't live without, or that one thing that is special to you, whatever it may be. I think it really opens up something in other people to start seeing that authentic side of yourself.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say that's kind of the challenge, I think, in the way that we talk about the event, is that because we're a podcast first and then we launched the event series, sometimes people think of it as a live podcast recording, which it's not. And then we share that's at a community event, and then it's like, okay, it's another networking event. But it's also not a networking event. It's sort of a way to connect where we have set intentional programmatic pieces or fun elements and tricks up our sleeve. So it's an interesting balance. Like Elliot said, I kind of err on the side of keeping more of it under wraps because I think it's exciting to go to an event like this and be surprised. Like you said, Jodie, like, you don't do a ton of research ahead of time because you want the person that you're talking to share those things and for you to be authentically surprised. So it's an interesting kind of balance also as we think about how do we get people excited about it while also curating those moments of intrigue and surprise and fun.
Right.
This is really interesting for a number of reasons from my perspective as a baby boomer, as an older person, because obviously most of my life, I did not deal with phones. I was one of the few in my generation who was not tech phobic, so I picked up on computers pretty quickly. But even for me, the idea of analyzing how communication works and how just basic socializing and conversation work, and where it gets missing when you take it away from, it was never even a thought. It was never even a topic of conversation. You just never, everybody lived in that same environment where, well, yeah, of course, we get together, we talk, that's what we do, you know? And now actually dealing with a large segment of the population that didn't grow up that way, and that is, the phone generation, as I'll call it, that phone generation perspective makes people like me stop and think, well, okay, what is involved in socializing? Yeah, I've been doing it all my life,
Interesting.
But I never really thought about what the elements are. There are elements to it. And in fact, as you were talking there, I realized, you mentioned networking, for instance. I realized that during the time that I was growing up, coming of age and so forth, there was nothing like networking. There was nothing about any of that kind of stuff. And then the idea of networking came in, and it was like a new thing. Like networking, why don't you just go meet somebody? Well, no, networking is important because that's how you build your business contacts. Oh, okay. And these formalized elements kept getting introduced until finally we had the ultimate formalized element, the phone and the social network. And all of it was formal. It's like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah, that's pretty. I think about that often. It's fascinating for someone like you, Gen X, like just the ride that you've gone on, from, I don't know, the 40s or 50s, 60s to now is just, even in the last 10, 15, 20 years is fascinating.
Crazy.
But I've never really thought about that. Like networking, that was just us meeting people, hanging out, like doing life. But now it's called networking, and that's kind of what it is. I think it's all about how it's packaged. Do you know what I mean? And that word is sort of taken on something very specific, which for me kind of feels commercial and corporate and a little icky. But it was going back to the last one we went to, and her saying, now tell us about a food that you can't live without. Immediately, I felt like I was not at a networking event. I felt like we were just kind of friends hanging out. And that's why I'm starting to see them now. It's like, I don't want to sell the podcast. Like, we'll talk about the podcast eventually. If you're talking to us for 5 minutes, eventually we'll bring it up, or you guys will ask a question. But I don't want this to be like we're trying to sell you the podcast. Like, I want it to be, we just want to meet new people. Like, that's what we care about. That's all we've ever really cared about, truly. So, but yeah, we really appreciate that insight. Walt never really thought about it like that. So,
why would you? I mean, you never
I mean,
experienced it. How could you think about that?
Yeah,
I think it's funny though, Walt. Sometimes we'll say, because we talk a lot about strategies, like what my brain is like, okay, when you fall in love, when you know, that's great. But what does that mean? What does that look like? How do you know when you know? So we do talk a lot about kind of strategies, and we often catch ourselves saying, this is going to sound really trivial, or you might have heard this a million times. But when you reframe and think about actually putting it into action, or taking the trivial and putting the intentionality with it, it's very interesting, because it feels like these ideas and strategies should come naturally to us, or should already kind of be instilled. And somewhere along the way, we've just sort of lost touch with them.
Well, you're zeroing in now on one of my other favorite topics, intentionality. Essentially, what are we going to give our conscious attention to? And more importantly, this is actually the bigger piece. What are we going to take our conscious attention away from? Because it's not like human beings are capable of saying, okay, I'm going to give my attention here, and then I'm just going to turn it off. No, my brain's off now. Sorry, come back later. That's not the way we work. We're always giving our attention to something. If you're alive, if you're conscious, if you're awake, you're giving your attention to something.
Right.
What my generation stumbled on for the longest time and is still kind of coming to grips with, and what the later generations are all kind of stumbling around, is intentionality requires making the choice.
Yeah.
Making a deliberate, conscious choice from moment to moment what you're going to give your attention to.
Right.
Especially in the 21st century, where we have these reams of data coming at us, far more than we could possibly consume, far more than we could possibly integrate. It becomes even more important to do that. And we're kind of getting pushed into it as a result.
Yeah.
All of us, no matter what our ages, we are being forced, in a sense, to face up to, you got to pick something right now, because if you don't, you're going to get overwhelmed.
I have this phrase that I've been wanting to implement. I just love words. And one of the hats that we made for our merch says, if not love, then what? And that's something that we could maybe talk about later. But what you're talking about now, this phrase keeps popping in my mind, which is, you have to start fighting for the less that you know. You have to start fighting for the less you know. We know way too much. Like, the reason that we're overwhelmed and that so many of us are anxious is because if you open it up and look at it plainly, like, if you're on your phone for 5 hours a day, you're subjecting yourself to literally thousands and thousands of pieces of information that our brains aren't meant to digest. It's impossible for our brains to keep up with that. You know what I mean? And so, like, when it comes to intentionality, I feel like there's a lack of intentionality, because our brains are so fragmented that we're never really conscious. We're sort of programmed, because we're just ingesting too much information, And so that's a word that we talk about all the time, which is intentionality. And we feel like that. I feel like that's lacking quite a bit, and that's something that we could, certainly work on as a species.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Walt, you're really hitting on something really special, which is, even if we do not intentionally put our energy and attention somewhere, our energy and attention still goes somewhere.
It does.
And so whether we decide with intention or not, we're giving something our time, our energy, and our attention. And so why not give it intention and decide where it goes and how it's utilized?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all are just really tired, like we live in a world where we work really hard. Like we want to make money so that we can afford life. Inflation's going up. Like we're all kind of experiencing all of this at the same time. And so I think the day-to-day fatigue, and especially this decision fatigue you're talking about, impacts that. And what would happen if we gave ourselves boundaries or intention? We've talked about even thinking about our schedule. It sometimes feels like when you give yourself a schedule or you set yourself a boundary, you're limiting yourself, but you're actually freeing up so much more space by saying, okay, if I'm going to intentionally put my focus here, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, whether it's love, whether it's generating revenue, whatever the thing might be. I talk a lot about like love and friendship and business have really, really strong parallels. It kind of opens you up to explore in those avenues.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Jody Lynn, I think that's an opening for you right there.
Well, I think love, relationships, money, they're all like our whole life is a parallel to everything else. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And when you were talking about the fatigue, I think we're also fatigued as a society as we watch the I don't know, beat roll or whatever, like the highlight reel, that's what it's called, highlight reel of people's lives. We're like, hey, I'm not there. I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not hustling enough. I'm not working enough. Whatever it is that comes up, that it makes us even more anxious and more fatigued and more feeling like we're not enough and we can't get away from it. Whereas if you just set that boundary to step out of that world for even 20 minutes and go outside, right. It's so interesting. If we turned off all of our phones and all of our TV, would we know what's happening in the world? No, we'd have no idea. It would just be a beautiful day outside.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's it.
Amen to that. Yeah.
I like to tell about that too. One of my favorite stories to tell is that there have been long chunks in my life where I stopped paying attention to news. Not all the time, but there are large periods of times where I did. And one big chunk was circa 1987 to about 1993 or so. I literally just turned off the news from my attention. It was a year before I learned through my own experience that the wall had come down. Oh, everybody else knew that the wall had come down. I didn't know that the wall had come down.
That's the reason fascinating. Wow.
Yeah. And the reason I mention that is that's like big news. That's news that's so big that if it happened today, I would have picked it up through social media. Something would have come along that would have cued me. At that time, I wasn't getting any cues. But the point is, despite the fact that happened, that big news event, and I didn't know about it for a year, didn't adversely affect me at all.
No.
Right.
I didn't miss anything. I could just go read about it later on. Mm-hmm. I didn't lose out on anything. There was no loss at all in not being directly plugged in to find out that major news event happened. Well, if that's true for the major events, what about the minor ones?
Right. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because a way that I've tried to justify my own phone usage with Sam is, for a while she was like, Twitter is really like messing with you, man. Like you're too plugged in. And then I would say my excuse would be like, well, I'm just that person. I need to know what's going on. I need to know what's happening. And it's like, that's fair. That's a fair point. But if you're not doing anything with the information, if you're not donating your time or your money, or if you're not, an activist in some sort of way, if you're not doing something with that information, something that benefits either you or the people around you, then it is, inherently, then it's harming you, And so that was my excuse for so long is, I'm just doing it to keep up to know what's going on. And at the end of the day, I think that was what my initial reaction was when you were saying that. I was like, oh, well, there's a balance. Like we should know certain things about what our government is doing with our tax dollars or whatever. But at the end of the day, what is it doing for you? Like, what is it doing to you? Those questions really matter. And that's where the intentionality comes in. Like, think about it. Like if it's really affecting you negatively, like you should make a change. And I think that our phones really get in the way of that intentionality. It's like we're just kind of like buzzing and always kind of just distracted, and it's hard to be conscious of what we're doing because we're just so, we're just too plugged in and distracted.
I think it's easy to see life as black and white or right and wrong. And a decision you make now means you're going to make it forever. But it's okay to release that idea. And like you said, there was a period of time where you made that decision and then you changed your mind. And like, that's life. And it's okay to change your mind and change how we're living and to reset and reframe. And Jody Lynn, when you said just go outside, like, that's what I mean. Some of these things sound so trivial, but we forget about them. They get lost to the wayside. And when we remember them and put that intention, okay, I've decided that I'm putting my phone away and then I'm going to spend that hour sitting on the balcony or taking a walk in the park. Something about that can totally change your day or your week or how you're inspired or what you might think of. And we did an entire episode about how inspired we felt. Just going to the park on a Sunday afternoon, feeling the sunshine in our face, watching all the people running and playing with their dogs and playing kickball and having a picnic. And there was something really special about putting our phones out of sight and being intentional with each other. That was really magical.
It's fun.
Absolutely. We have my family and I, we've been building this ghost town for several years. It was like a thing that we thought of one Boxing Day Christmas. We were just like, hey, let's go to the bush and make a fire. And then my dad was like, hey, we should make this a town, like a place to party. And I was turning 30 that year. At the year that was coming up, and I was like, all right, let's do this. So it started with like a bar and some tarps and we had my 30th birthday there, and there was like 170 people invited. It was pouring rain and 75 people showed up for a pig roast. It was awesome. We just had a blast. And then it's built out from there. My husband and I actually got married out there, and
it's amazing.
Thank you. There's just something about this place. And it's really funny because the last time that I was there, they live just down the road, so I'm there a lot. But we had a party for all of our neighbors. We're working on kind of something similar as you guys, bringing the community together to thrive. And so we wanted to have like a community watch and, have each other's backs inside of the community. There's lots of rural crime and all of that stuff. So we have like a WhatsApp group. And I don't know, because I'm young and, I just got looped into it. I'm the technology person, which is not, whatever, right? So people all night were coming up to me like, hey, can you show me how to download WhatsApp? And I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Here's your phone, blah, blah, blah. And I was sitting there by the fire and I was like, oh, hey, blah, blah, blah. Can you send them the link for WhatsApp? And he's like, why can't you do it? And I said, I don't have my phone.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, what do you mean you don't have your phone? Like, you're literally the youngest person here and you don't have your phone? And I'm like, no, I don't bring my phone.
You're not doing your job, Jody Lynn. What's wrong
I know,
with you?
Right? I'm a terrible communications manager. But this is the place, what we've cultivated. We call it Waynestown. What we've cultivated.
What do you call it?
Waynestown. That's my dad's name. Waynestown.
I love it.
Yeah. But what we've cultivated here is this space of togetherness, of bringing people together, and there is this magical feeling of safety and peace and serenity at this place. It's just inherent in everywhere that you go. And literally a fire happened a couple of years ago and it literally like dead stopped at the town and went all the way around, but never actually. Yeah, it's crazy. This place is very magical, but there is something about being in nature and connecting to nature and connecting to humans. It just is so much more raw and real.
Yeah.
I totally get what you guys are trying to achieve here. I love
that. That is fascinating. And I have to say I'm envious. I think that's like such a
We're coming over.
That's such a cool idea. You're calling it a ghost? Yeah, right? Why are you calling it
Canada,
a ghost?
so it'd have to be a Canadian edition, but
actually though, Toronto is like in our top 3 cities.
Are you in Toronto?
We might go to Canada. I don't know.
Well, yeah, Canada's other side of the country.
I was gonna say Canada's pretty big.
That's okay. We've got the mountains close-ish to where I live. Yeah.
I mean, something I'm also hearing you say is the power of leading by example. And that is the topic we've thought about. It's like, okay, you can't change other people, but you can change yourself. And so if we feel really passionately about a particular way of living or a particular way of connecting, if we just go be good stewards of that out in the world, will inevitably attract other people who are interested in doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Are you still thinking about the ghost town?
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the ghost town. Why is it? Wait, really quick. Was it a ghost town that you built that you added onto, or was it like literally nothing and then you built a ghost town? I'm confused.
It was nothing, and we built a ghost town. Yeah,
that's really incredible. What the
there's
heck?
like
That's
a saloon.
amazing.
There's a John Wayne cabin. There's
the heck?
Yeah, my dad's obsessed with John Wayne. We have horses, and that's something that it really helped me was animals. I mean, for me, being around horses, you have to be present where you are. You can't be on your phone. Well, you could, but you're probably going to hurt very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always been my place to go, is that farm. And my parents' house is just like a couple minute walk away from the ghost town, but the ghost town is surrounded by trees and there's nothing else but this town where we have these little things, and we're building different things on too. We want to have like old schooner wagons that you could sleep in, because we want to do that.
That's amazing.
But the whole point of it, and we want to have events there too, the whole point of it is to bring people together. I've never heard of the phone free thing, but it's really bad reception, so it ends up being mostly phone free.
Phone free by default.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. You need to market it that way. That's awesome. That's so cool. I'm inspired by that.
Have an event there.
You can actually advertise. Bring your phone; it just won't work.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. That's amazing, Jody. That's really, really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm inspired to move to the mountains now and create a ghost town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool.
It's just something about nature, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think too, we get so caught up. Oh, I'm going to save this. I'll be the ender.
You'll save it? You'll remember?
I'll remember. Don't you worry, I got this.
Okay.
It was just going to come out, Walt. You know it was coming.
I knew it was, yeah. She's also kind of signaling, because I mean, as usual, whenever something is really going well, like this conversation is, I kind of forget, and I looked up and, oh my God, the hour's almost up. That's basically what she's telling me here, and I had well, thank you, Jody Lynn. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
On the other hand, it's like, really? It's over so quick?
I know, that was fast.
But it's also a signal to me that I have a few things that I do every time, and I want to do them with you guys too.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to do is I want to get you people to tell others who are interested in what you're doing how they find out more about what you're doing, and how do they reach you. If they want to go to one of these events, how do they find where you're having the event? How do they sign up for it? What's the social media thing you're supposed to do in order to find out about how not to do social media?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're you know, obviously we have a website. It's somethingmorehuman.co without the M. It's not .com, it's .co, somethingmorehuman.co. But really, we're really the strongest on Instagram. We're posting most often there. We have a TikTok and YouTube as well, but you're going to find out information about the Denver event that's coming up in a couple months here on Instagram. So
if you're not on social media, you can just sign up for our email newsletter. We don't send out like a weekly thing. Only when something exciting is happening, we'll email you.
And you can do that through the website, but you can find us on Instagram. It's just the full @somethingmorehuman. That's where you can find us. And of course, if you want to listen to the podcast, we're on your favorite listening platform, Apple, Spotify. All of them. We're on all of them. So pretty easy to find us. Yeah.
All right. And we'll include, of course, a link in the show description to make it easy for people to find the website, because we like to make things easy, even if you are on a phone, especially if you're on a phone. Actually, you're not listening if you're not on a phone, but that's another thing. Anyway, second thing I want to do is I want to share with you something that I noticed that I'm going to be curious to see what your take is on this one. I noticed this a couple of years ago, and I started doing this as a regular practice ever since I noticed that everybody who comes onto the show is a giver in some way. And so they're voluntarily getting out there doing podcasts, they're blogging, they're web posting, they're putting stuff onto social media, they're doing all this stuff, putting all this content out about whatever it is they learned along the way that they feel everybody else needs to know about, which is great. And I love that. And in many cases, they're, maybe they're offering professional services, maybe they're coaches, maybe they're writers, they've written books, they've got courses coming out, all kinds of cool stuff like that. But in the process of promoting all that stuff, they're putting all this free content out there. And the thing that I noticed is we don't get credit for that. That kind of gets skipped over. Like, well, that's part of what you have to do if you're going to market. You kind of just do that. And I said, wait a minute, we should be recognizing that. So on behalf of all those people you've never met, you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who have been seeing your content, hearing your podcast, seeing the stuff you're putting on Instagram and so forth, and getting benefit from it, on their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. And we feel the same to both of you for your time and for what you're doing as well. So the feeling is mutual, definitely.
We appreciate that. So now Jody Lynn's got her big setup. I mean, I saved her for last, and she knew that I was doing this, and this is what she was alluding to. The reason that we say this for last is that Jody Lynn, I have 3 co-hosts who do these shows with me, and Jody Lynn's like a pinnacle of what all 3 are able to do. They're all able to tie together what we've been talking about into one little compact thing, just perfectly summarizing it. I love putting the pressure on when I do this. This is great.
Yeah, no pressure.
But they're so good at it. And Jody Lynn is like the queen of this. She is so good at this. And she already has it saved up. She wasn't even cueing me. She already had it saved up. That's what she was trying to tell me. So Jody Lynn, what were you saving up? I'm really curious to know.
In a world where we're constantly inundated with how we should be or how things should be or what it's supposed to look like, I think we're the most hungry for true human connection, for that being together. That's what the world needs. And I'm going to lean on some of the words that Sam said earlier, leading by example. Not only are you showing the people around you the difference that it can make in your own life by just trying to connect with yourselves, your partner, and those you care about most, but you're also signaling to the communities around you how important this connection is, and that a ripple effect, just energy wise, is so incredibly tremendous and impactful. And this is what our world needs, is to have more human connection. So thank you for Sam and Elliot, what you bring to this world. And I can't wait to see more.
Thank you so much.
That was beautifully said. Thank you.
Did I undersell her? I'm just kind of curious.
Not at all.
Not at all. Yeah. It's pretty impressive.
What?
Oh my goodness. Sam and Elliot Archuleta, thank you so much for joining us. And we love what you're doing with Something More Human. We love what you're doing with the Return to Real Life courses. We love the whole thing. Man, we got to stay in touch about this. I didn't even bring up the project I'm working on, but I'll send you information about that separately.
Yeah, I'm so curious about it. We'd love to stay in touch and see what you've got cooking.
Let's put it in very brief, very simply. I'm trying to create the next social media app that actually socializes.
I love it. Awesome. we're on board if you need
beta testers.
Yeah, or help or whatever. We're there.
Yeah,
so please,
I love it. Yeah,
don't hesitate to reach out.
I even have my positioning statement. My positioning statement is returning social into social media.
Cool.
Nice. I love it.
Exciting. I can't wait to see what you do.
So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everyone.